they're having sex and they're getting pregnant and they're giving birth to infected babies. Hey everybody, it's me, Minu. Welcome back to Minu's Mortuary, where I talk all things horror. I know you're probably wondering, is this a new shirt? Yes, it is. It's a shirt that I got from a medieval torture museum, and it looked cooler on the pictures, but like actually wearing it, it don't look as cool. Yeah, so it kind of looks like I got like this necklace thing with the skulls hanging under it, but this necklace part just looks weird. Anyway, I am back again to talk about another zombie thing back to back. Well, not zombies, infected. Another infected movie, because 28 years later just came out, and I wanted to get my thoughts out as quickly as possible, so I'm not going to have a lot of good visuals because it's out in theaters right now. It's not on, anywhere where I can get a lot of good images. I'll do my best, but it's in theaters right now. Go watch it if you haven't watched it. We have waited so long between 28 weeks later and now 28 years later. 28 months later just went off in the ether, but we're now at 28 years later. And this movie answers a lot of questions about why there would even be a movie in the first place. Like, why would we have a 28 years later when in 28 weeks later we established that the people with the rage virus would die off very quickly? So how could they have survived for 28 years? The movie answers that. And also, it gives us a lot more introduction into new characters because they're going to do a trilogy. So it's not like its own like contained movie. There's a lot of stuff that happens right at the very end to kind of hook you so you can go watch the next movie and the next movie. Basic premise of this movie is 28 years later, right? The British mainland has been under quarantine indefinitely by the rest of Europe. So they have managed to defeat the virus everywhere else around Britain and quarantine Britain because Britain was ground zero in the first place. And so nobody is allowed to leave. And the little mini islands that are around Britain are also quarantined. No one's allowed to leave. And we see that even in the modern day, boats are constantly going around the mainland trying to make sure that nobody tries to escape ever, to prevent the spread of the virus. And it has been successful. As far as we can tell in the movie, there have been no outbreaks outside of Britain at this point. So that's a good thing, right? But there are a lot of people who are still alive. So in my mind, I'm like, you're going to introduce these people 28 years later who are still alive while also introducing the fact that the virus is still there. Like, this doesn't make sense. What's going on? What are you doing? So we are introduced to a couple main characters. Now, the movie starts with this. It's really weird because it's got like a bunch of little white kids watching Teletubbies. And it reminded me of when I was little and I watched Teletubbies and I could not look away. And I felt deeply disturbed by the fact that I could not look away from that show. And literally, as the outbreak is starting and everybody's panicking, they're just throwing all the kids in the room like, just keep watching TV, don't worry about it, we'll handle it. And it isn't until one of the kids, whose name is Jimmy, goes up to the door, and because he's in front of the door, when the zombies bash through the door, he ends up behind the door while all the little kids in the room are getting like ripped apart. So he is able to escape to his father, who is a religious figure. Online it says he's a vicar. I don't know anything about religion, but his father is a religious figure who thinks that this is like a divine judgment, that this is what is supposed to happen. Like, those people who think it's like the end times and God is doing this on purpose. And so Jimmy is able to escape because they all come in and they attack his father. And that's the end of his story for now. He shows up at the very end as an adult, but they just introduce him to, I guess, let us know that he's going to be a main character in the series overall, even if he's not a main character in this first movie. So then we are introduced to the community of survivors on Lindisfarne. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But it is that place that is an island, but during low tide, there is like a sea bridge that is between the island and the mainland. So during high tide, you can easily get swept away and you can't, cross it on foot. But during low tide, you can cross it on foot. I immediately recognized it because and it's a popular tourist destination where people would go and walk it to be like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of the ocean. So on here, we have our main characters, Spike, who's 12 years old, his dad, Jamie, and his wife, Isla. The water, the rising tides, that has given them an advantage in keeping away the infected. So they've been able to survive on this island for many years, doing regular exhibitions to the mainland to gather various supplies or anything they can get there. And so people are trained on this island how to use bows and arrows to kill the infected. They train the kids. They're like, shoot them in the head, shoot them in the heart, to take them down easily. So Spike is 12 years old, and today is the day that he is going to go to the mainland. Everyone objects to this except for his father, Jamie, who thinks that he is mature enough, who thinks he's old enough. Now, it is usually that a child must be around 14 or 15, I think they said, in order to make this pilgrimage to go scavenger hunting and all of that. But Jamie insists his son is ready. His son is obviously not ready. He's obviously scared, but he's like trusting his dad. Now, Isla, who is his mom, who is also Villanelle, like it's actually Villanelle. I immediately, when I saw her, I was like, is that Villanelle? And then I was like, nah, that must be some other white woman. But then the more I saw, I was like, that's Villanelle, AKA, what's her real name? Jodie Comer, who is playing the mom. And I was just shocked. I was just like, oh no, you about to hurt my feelings, because I love Killing Eve. And seeing her there, I was just like, you gonna hurt my feelings again. But she's really good. She's doing a great job. And basically she has a mystery illness that causes her a lot of pain. She's not eating. She's just sleeping all day, and she's very confused mentally. Like, she doesn't know what's going on. She's getting regular nosebleeds, and she's just going through these periods of confusion where she doesn't know who it is she's talking to sometimes. Sometimes she's perfectly lucid, and the other time she's just flying off the handle. And they're just dealing with it because in this day and age, post-apocalypse, there are no doctors on the island that could treat her. So she's just laying in bed all day as they just try to keep her comfortable. So Jamie takes Spike to the mainland. And really the only purpose of Jamie wanting Spike to go to the mainland is so he can have experience killing an actual infected versus the dummies. Because there really isn't much purpose to go to the mainland. Like, they have created a self-sustaining society on this island. They have running water, they have livestock, they have food. Like, there's nothing that they need. And even when they go onto the mainland and they go into like a little house and stuff, and Spike picks up like silverware, he's like, we don't need that. And then he's like, what are we looking for? And Jamie's like, well, this place would have been picked over 100 times by now because it's 28 years later. But you never know, you could find something. When they do find a infected person who is tied up, Jamie's literally like, this is why I brought you here. I want you to kill. I want you to get used to killing. And it's such a weird, like, what the fuck, dad moment, because in any other situation, and I said this about The Last of Us, I know a lot of you haven't seen it, go watch it, please. But I said this about The Last of Us, is like, in a post-apocalyptic scenario, you age a lot faster. You just have to in order to survive. But in this situation, because they are able to live peacefully on the island, and all they ever need to do is defend the sea bridge occasionally when infected try to attack, there really isn't a huge reason for you to push your children to get the experience of killing so early on. Like, it's not necessary. And it's also established by the woman who's in charge of the community that they do not allow people to go after loved ones who have not returned from their missions. So if they go out there and die, and everybody's like, he is 12. If he dies, or if y'all get separated, we will not send anyone after you because we lost way too many people trying to rescue people. So there will be no rescue if something happens to you out there. Like, there's all the warnings. There's no reason for them to do this other than the fact that Jamie wants to see his son kill somebody, which is weird given that they've been able to peacefully live on this community for many, many years at this point. And it's also established that about a year or so before Spike was born, that they did do more missions, more exhibitions and things like that, which would make sense, but they just stopped doing it after a while as much, but they have their round the clock people who are watching the sea bridge and everything like that. The other part of the story is that Spike, when they return, finds out that there was a guy with the name Doctor who was living on the mainland. And so he ends up grabbing his mom and taking her to the mainland to find this doctor guy, who reveals that Isla has cancer and it's terminal. There's no way to treat cancer in this world, and she's gonna die anyway. So he ends up mercy killing her, which again, Villanelle, why do you have to be dying and sacrificing yourself? Like, it just, I love this actress so much. But anyway, Spike ends up at the end of the movie deciding to stay on the mainland, and that's where he runs into Jimmy as a grown up. So that's the basis of the story. But what I want to get into is the infected and the infection, the rage virus that infects people. Because coming back to what I said at the beginning, they established in 28 weeks later that these people, like, obviously they're raging, they're screaming, they're running, and they are obviously infecting other people through their bodily fluids. But after a certain time, because they're still human, they're alive. So they're not undead zombies. They're alive. Their bodies just kind of collapse because they're not getting any nutrients or anything. They're just going around biting people. And if you're running around all the time, you're expending a lot of energy and a lot of calories. They're not eating enough to keep up with that. So they end up collapsing and then eventually starving to death. And so it's like, how could this last for 28 years? There's 3 ways this virus has lasted for 28 years. The first one is that the infected have evolved in a way that allows them to survive for longer without food. And so one of the first infected that we see on the mainland is these bloater looking infected, where they are crawling around the majority of the time. So being bloated and stalking and moving slowly is a good way to preserve your energy until you get to your next meal. The second way that I always pick up, and it happens a lot in both zombie movies and infected movies, is they adapt to eat non-humans. So while they may attack humans, they can adapt to eat animals, which will then give them the nutrients they need to survive longer. And we see in the movie a dead animal that's been eviscerated. We see towards the end of the movie an infected grabbing a fish that somebody was cooking and then eating the fish. We see them, hunting animals and eating. So that's another way for them to survive for a very long time. But then the third way that I was not expecting, when you see a child one, it's like, well, there's no way that over the last 28 years, there was an affected child that just stayed as a child the whole time. What's going on here? So it's very interesting. And then later on, you see what my suspicions were already confirmed of a pregnant infected just walking around. These are infected humans, which mean they can reproduce. They're having sex and they're getting pregnant and they're giving birth to infected babies, which is why the virus has not died out. So I was like, that's really interesting. That's really cool. There are multiple avenues that this virus has taken that has allowed them to survive this long. And what we see as well later on in the movie with Isla is that she comes across that same infected pregnant woman that we saw earlier, and she is giving birth inside of a train, and Isla helps her give birth, and the baby is not infected. Now, in real life, there's no way. And if this was grounded in reality, because the mom being infected would pass through the bloodstream into the baby and the baby would be infected. There's no way she could carry this baby for 9 months and they not be infected. Babies have been infected in lesser viruses, let alone this one that the mom herself was probably born with as well. But the baby in this world, the baby comes out and they're not infected, which means that the babies are turned after they're born. They're born completely free of the virus, and then they are turned after they're born, and then they, grow up in the mainland. So, but that's a very interesting thing. And I can't wait to see what like Roanoke Gaming says about the science and the biology behind how the fuck that happened. I felt like all of that was a very interesting way to build up the world, because ultimately with this being a trilogy, they are trying to build up a world and they are trying to answer all these questions that people have of like, how is it even possible that this could be, you know, still going on for 28 years. So they've adapted, they've evolved, and they are reproducing. That is why the mainland is under, that is why Britain in general is under an indefinite quarantine. There's no situation where they can just, you know, swing by and all the infected are dead and everything's in the clear now. It's just not. Another thing that I thought was interesting was I didn't watch a lot of the trailers because I didn't want to be spoiled. But from the little bit that I did see of images, I thought that there was going to be this cult that was worshiping the infected or something. And that's why there was that big mountain of skulls that we were seeing in the promotional material. But it was all turned out to just be one guy, like one man who you could say he went crazy at some point, but decided to start rounding up all the dead bodies and burning them so that he can take their skulls and create a mountain of skulls. But by the nature of him being a doctor, he also has developed these poison darts, I would say, where he can shoot infected with it to calm them down and make them freeze so that he can get away from them. He also knows that iodine, I think it rejects the virus. So then if any of the blood or the body fluids get on him, it keeps him from being infected because he covers his whole body with it. But he just decided one day that he wanted to build a mountain of skulls, and he thought that it was very poetic that everyone must die, and you know, you love those who have died and things like that. And he just be living there. The fact that he is alive and not been swarmed, because he is literally like burning things all the time so that at night from afar you can see the smoke and the flame of him just burning all these skulls of these bodies that he's finding, and the infected have not swarmed him before. But then it's also revealed towards the end when he's like helping Spike and saving Spike, is that he has a lot of hiding places around the mainland that he uses to avoid them, because most of the time the infected, if they can't find the person that they were attacking, they will go on and go somewhere else and do something else. So they don't just hang around unless you're an alpha. Now, I don't like it being called an alpha, knowing all the discourse about alpha in this day and age, but the alpha is what we've seen in a lot of zombie and infected movies and TV shows, which is that version of the infected that is somehow bigger, taller, and stronger than all of the other infected. And this happens in The Last of Us, which is in, you know, my other review. Go watch that. This has happened in Army of Darkness. This has happened in a lot of different zombie and infected media. You would just have a breed that evolves to be bigger and stronger and faster and more intelligent than all of the other infected. So the alpha, I'm going to go ahead and assume the alpha is the father of the baby that Isla helps the infected woman deliver, and was the lover of the infected pregnant woman. Hunts them down very ruthlessly, relentlessly, because he's looking for the baby. But Spike ends up escaping with the baby anyway. I don't like him being called the alpha, but I like having an infected that has evolved, right? Like I said, like they have evolved in multiple different ways that have enabled them to survive in such large populations. Because if they did not evolve, you can only have a baby every 8 to 9 months. So if they did not evolve, it would have been hard for them to keep up a population that would have made them that dangerous. You could have easily come through and wiped them out and kind of cleaned up the area. And you know what? 28 weeks later, I already showed you that the U.S. military kind of fucked that whole situation. So I get if they don't want to try again. The other thing I thought that was interesting, it felt very much like I was watching, like it felt like a fever dream. And a lot of times, like there's this clear story about Spike and Jamie and Isla and, you know, what they're doing, and Spike wanting to save his mother and her having cancer and all of that. But then there's all these other random shots that you get. And it's funny because I think from a world building perspective, there are not enough infected to create these huge moments. They tried multiple times to recreate what was the beginning of 28 Weeks Later, when the dad is like running across the plains and the zombies are coming down in like waves. And there was multiple scenes like that where you're running across the mainland and zombies are coming from every which way. But there's such a smaller population. I'm sorry, I even call them zombies again. There's such a smaller population of infected in this post-apocalyptic world that you cannot simply achieve what you achieved in the first two movies. It's too far on. So in order to compensate for that, they put in a lot of these clips of infected at night, like running around, hunting, chasing things, hunting things, like, and it has no place in the core part of the story, which is Spike, Jamie, and Isla, and Spike and Jamie on the mainland, and then later Spike and Isla on the mainland. It has no place in the story, but it's like cool visuals, and it gives a sense that, you know, they're out there and they're scary and they're dangerous. But it just randomly, like, some of them look like night vision, but like the red version of night vision instead of the green version. But it's just really interesting, and it's weird why they would just randomly cut those in to the movie at just random points. But it's definitely unsettling, and I still liked it. The other thing that I thought that completely threw me off was that there was these scenes of the infected chasing down these soldiers. So they're being chased and they're like shooting with guns and everything. So when I saw that scene play out, I thought that this was a flashback to like maybe back like the end of 28 Weeks Later, when we saw like Paris or something being overrun by the rage virus, probably the fault of that little boy. Later we meet a Swedish soldier named Eric who has guns, who is like, no, we were patrolling the mainland and our boat sank and we had to come ashore and we got overwhelmed really quickly by the infected and everyone has died except for me. And so it's very interesting because it's another reminder that the real world has moved on, because everything you learn from Eric and Spike interacting with each other, he's talking about radios, he's talking about cell phones, he's talking about these things that Spike knows nothing about because he was born post-apocalypse on an island that is completely isolated, has no contact with the outside world. The outside world has moved on without them. And Eric, all he was supposed to do was like, you know, patrol the island, but they were not even prepared to actually kill the infected in the way that Spike's community has been training all of their children, and they're training round the clock on how to kill the infected. These soldiers with automatic rifles or whatever you call them are not able to properly defend themselves against what I would argue was a small amount of infected compared to what we've seen in the rest of the movies. But they are so poorly equipped that it's like, if there was ever an evolution where, like, say a group of alphas or something figure out how to use a boat, like, I don't know, I guess they'd have to just sink the boat. But like, you guys were going around this island completely unprepared with automatic rifles and you still could not kill off the infected and get somewhere safe. That's crazy. Whereas there's a man who is covered in iodine with a blow dart who's going around, and he's been living here for like 13 years by himself, surviving all of the infected. I did have a lot of issue with all the really, really thick accents and trying to process what was being said. I came around, like, I say 20 minutes into the movie, I began to accept a lot more of like the dialogue, and like I could understand a lot more. But in the beginning I was very confused, which is why I had to look up like what Spike's dad name was, because I just forgot. Like, I didn't hear it in the midst of everything else that was being said. But yeah, I thought that it was a really good story, and I thought that they did really good world building. I thought they answered a lot of our questions very well. Yeah, I thought the infected were cool too. I liked the variants of infected. Always love to see the variants of infected. It doesn't matter what it is. But I also liked the addition of the fact that they are reproducing. So that means that they are like humans, because they are humans. They're just infected humans, concerned about things like survival. Because in any other situation, if they were like mindless monsters, like the people on the community would believe, or even Eric and the people outside the mainland, they believe that they are mindless monsters, which is why it was so easy for Eric. Well, he was trigger happy and scared, but it was so easy for Eric to kill the pregnant infected right after she gave birth because she growled really hard and he just shot at her. He fired off so hard, I thought he was gonna kill everybody in the train, first of all, because he was just way too trigger happy and scared, and then wanting to shoot the baby because he, in his mind, like, they're not normal, right? Like, there are all these mindless monsters that are just going around ripping people apart. And no shade, I mean, the alpha is ripping people's spinal cords out of their bodies, but that's a different situation. But the infected are reproducing, and when they are reproducing and having these babies, they are obviously, they have to care for the babies. It would be, if they were really mindless monsters, they would either eat the baby because it's not infected when it's born, or they would just leave it to die. But they're not. They're obviously caring for and raising children, which shows a higher level of cognitive processing, which shows a level of empathy. And even the alpha, who originally is presented as, you know, something that is just a dangerous, unstoppable force, showing that moment of compassion when he realizes that his lover, whatever, is dead and the baby is gone, is a huge thing. And they did do that a little bit in the Army of Darkness movie, where you had that Apex infected and he had a queen and he tried to save the baby and things like that. But I would argue Army of Darkness just was not a well-written movie. And I feel like 28 years later, there's a lot of areas where it is written really well. I think the cinematography is really good. I think the world building is good, and I see where they're going with the next movie, with the reintroduction of Jimmy and his group of who knows. And I mean, there's still room for there to be a cult. Like, Jimmy and his people could obviously be a cult. I mean, Jimmy's father was a religious zealot who thought that the infection was the end of times and it was God's divine judgment. He gave Jimmy his cross necklace, and Jimmy is seen at the end still wearing the cross necklace. Now, it does look kind of like they are, because now that we've humanized the infected a little bit, they do seem to be a bit unnecessarily cruel in beating and killing the infected. So that can still be the cult that we were all thinking was going to happen when we saw like the Mountain of Skulls and we saw the weird like face mask. But I like that they did that misdirection, because it would have been easy to do another post-apocalyptic movie where the main villain was a cult that used the infected as a way to kill and control other people. There's multiple post-apocalyptic movies where there is a cult that, you know, ends up being more dangerous than whatever the original threat was in the movie. But the scary mask that we were seeing and all of the promotional stuff and the teasers was actually just a mask that people would wear within Spike and Jamie's community. Why? I don't know. I thought that they were going to do something like that was going to be like, and now we're going to drink some blood, but no. So it just turned out to be a mask that the people would wear, and sometimes he would put it on the dummies that the kids would train on to like shoot their bows and arrows at. And then it turned out that the Mountain of Skulls was just Dr. Kelson trying to find a way to commemorate all of the people who died on the mainland, especially the people who had a special memory, like significant memories. But yeah, I do definitely think that the next one is going to be about Jimmy leading a cult of people who are extremely dangerous. I like that we're seeing a lot of this through the eyes of Spike, who again is 12 years old and was very innocent growing up on the island, and now has chosen to live on the mainland as a way to kind of find himself and cope with his mother's death. And he's matured in ways that his father would have wanted him to mature, but he didn't return to the community because he doesn't want to be like his father. You know, his father was just letting his wife waste away while he used his son as a way to give him more clout. Because Spike struggled a lot through what his father put him through. But when he retold the story to people, he told it in a way that made it seem like it was empowering for Spike, that made him look like a great dad, that allowed him to get women that he could sleep with and get attention. So now Jamie has to reckon with that, because you really just like, you used your son and you turned your back on your wife, and now you've lost both of them and you're not allowed to go after them because it's against the rules in the community to go after them. So yeah, love the movie. Want to watch it again as soon as I can get my hands on it on streaming or something. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that I probably left out that requires more in-depth, like watching it multiple times and taking a bunch of notes. But I kind of like to do movies where I experience the movie, I experience the show. So I may not get all of the details right because of the fact that I am focused on the experience of it and whether or not I'm actually enjoying it. It's kind of like the difference between watching something happen and watching something happen through your phone when you're recording it is a different experience. And the world looks different when you're watching it through that extra barrier. I share these movies with y'all because I like them. I like talking about them. I enjoy them. I'm not going to get all the little details right and all of the things you missed right, but I let you know what I catch. And again, as always, I want to have a discussion in the comments. Those of you who have seen the movie, tell me what you think about it. Tell me what you think about Spike and Jamie's relationship. Tell me what you think about Isla, because that's Villanelle and I'm just a fan anyway. There are some scenes in there that I didn't bring up about Isla that I thought were really cool, that if you haven't seen it, when you see it, you'll be like, yeah. It's just, Jodie Comer's great. And also tell me what you think about where we think the story is going in terms of Jimmy and his group of people as well. But as always, you know, if you like this video, like the video, subscribe, share it in your horror groups. I really appreciate all the support. I appreciate all the comments, all the opinions, all the discourse. It's really exciting to get to talk about these things with you guys. So yeah, comment as much as you want, share as much as you want. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.